Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Well, thank you for responding. One more time. Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
I just had lunch, so you're in trouble. Okay. So I'm not sure whether everybody is here, but I have to get started because I got to honor your time. I have an hour to present. I want to, where's my sidekick? Oh, she's right there. So I want to share with you guys who we are. We are the Multicultural Department, and I am Susan Osiago, and that's Dr. Sequoia. And I want to share a little bit about who we are and what we do. So you guys do know in 2015, we, through a court order, were instructed to ensure that our curriculum was representative of our students, and that our curriculum was anchored in the lives and experiences of our students. So we came on board and we spent several tiring days reconstructing all the curriculum across all disciplines to ensure that it is reflective of our student populations. And so that's what we do. But one of the coolest things was TUSD invested a lot of money and purchased books to support our teachers, because I've got to be honest with you, I taught in the state of Washington for 15 years. And in TUSD, we are asking our teachers to be cultural brokers. I had a teacher call me one day and say, "Man, Susan, what are you talking about? I have 19 cultures. How am I supposed to be congruent to 19 cultures in my classroom?" And we'll talk a little bit about that today, but before we begin, one of the things I really want to share with you guys is, in the early 1960s, we knew that culture was fundamental to teaching and learning. Because when we think about culture, culture is the lens through which we take in information and we make connections. It's come full circle, and we've realized unless our learning and the activities we present our students are steeped or reflect their cultural lens, there's a disconnect in learning. So it's kind of gone full circle. So we did the, hi there, we did this 15 years ago in the state of, no, actually it was 15 years ago in the state of Washington, but it's so exciting to see that we are now looking at culture and saying every child comes into our classroom with what we refer to as a funds of knowledge. That is the way they view the world. Whether we like it or not, we all view the world differently because of our cultural socialization. So that's what we've been tasked with in our department, and we do numerous PDs. We're two of us, but Dr. Trujillo has said he wants us in 89 schools. Good luck. So we're still trying to figure that out, but somehow or the other we will. So we only have an hour. Usually we go out to schools and we do an intense training. We also do summer trainings where we actually pay our teachers to show up for our trainings. So we don't have a lot of time today, so we're going to move real fast, but we're going to have you do some engagements, all right? And those are our activities. All right, so the first thing I want us to do is a warm-up activity. It's called What's in a Name? To say a name is to begin a story, okay? So what I want us to do is take a few minutes, and I want you to respond to the 4 questions up there. Where does your name come from? What does your name, how was your name chosen? What does your name mean? And how does your name tie into or contribute to your sense of identity? So I want you to think about those 4 very crucial questions. And these are questions that came up when we began to have focus group with students. They said, you know, one of the most important things is for my teachers to know my name, because my name is associated with a history and a story. So let's think about it. So we did this with a couple of PDs for teachers, and we had to stop the teachers from talking. Okay, refocus now. So do you want to take a few minutes to think about that? And anybody who's willing to share, please raise your hand. At this moment, we would have teachers share amongst each other, or also students. So when we've shared this activity, a lot of students or a lot of teachers have used this to begin to cultivate community in their classrooms. All right, you want to share? Awesome. Here we go.
My name is Catherine. In my family, we're always named after relatives. And so I was named after a great-great-aunt. I happen to know my genealogy that goes way back because both sides of my family came over to Mayflower. My name was chosen for my great-aunt. It means pure or clean. I'm not so sure it's the right name for me. And my identity, my brothers are Fletcher and Clifford, so we have very old English names. I was just really happy I got Catherine because my mom wanted to name me Lavinia Molly.
Oh, wow.
And I thought Catherine was way better. So my sense of identity was Catherine isn't an overly old name, and figuring I could have been a Minerva or a Lavinia, I was kind of like, I'm good with that.
Oh. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you for sharing. Somebody else? Woohoo! Bring it to you.
I'll share mine because I've done this with students for many, many years.
Oh.
And I call it history of my name, actually. But mine, where does my name come from? Well, my first name is Brenda and my second name is Noemi. And how was my, so I don't really know, well, I'll get to that. How was your name chosen? It was chosen between my mother and my aunt during the time, during the 80s, where my parents were gonna leave their country and come to the United States. My mother always wanted a biblical name because it marks it's part of my identity. So it marks our belief system. And so she wanted Noemi as my first name, Naomi. But my aunt told her, well, no one's gonna be, that pronunciation is not gonna be the best, so why don't you name her Brenda or Brenda, because you can spell it in English and Spanish the same way, and it just changes the pronunciation. So when I had these conversations with my mother, now that I'm an educator, I tell her, wow, Mom, that was such a great move because, yeah, so, a lot of people call me Brenda, and that's fine. A lot other people call me Brenda Noemi, and it's such an important, I think, opportunity for, it's been an important opportunity for my students to know that because they can definitely relate to the immigration part of it, and it leads into so many, many, many questions and connections.
Well, thank you very much. So, unfortunately, because of time, we're going to move on. But I think one of the most key things I wanted to share with you is, like I said, to say a name is to begin a story. Names are often the first things we learn about people. They are histories, stories, and lives attached to names. When I think about some of the schools I've been to, and we have a lot of the refugee students, especially the ones who are coming from Dadaab, which is one of the largest refugee camps, their entire life has been decimated. The only thing they come with is their names. And I'll share with you about my culture, which is kind of super strange. So, my father's name tells you, in my culture, you have to be named. My father's culture has to be named after something significant that was happening. So he was called Harvest because that was a harvest season. And so when you think about it, can you imagine how many people are called Harvest? But it's certain communities that use that particular term. And so before I got married and I told you my last name, you could tell exactly what community I came from, exactly around who are my clansmen and who my community was. So again, to say a name is to tell a story. So that's what's so valuable about really recognizing your students' names. Thank you for sharing. Okay. Oops. So, lots of people, when we began talking about multicultural education, lots of people asked me, what does that mean? Okay? One of the most important things me and my sidekick, Junko Sakoi, have brought to TUSD's a redefinition of what multicultural education is. Multicultural education is all-encompassing. It's not just based on race and ethnicity. That is one component of multicultural education. Multicultural education includes individuals that have normally been underrepresented. So that includes disability, gifted, gender, sexual orientation, it includes socioeconomic status. We are very broad when we talk about multicultural education. And when I came in to TUSD, I realized it was always affiliated to race and ethnicity. That is one component of it. So what do we mean by multicultural education? Basically is to ensure, it advocates that students and their life experiences should be placed at the center of teaching and learning. So you want to look around as what are kids interested in? Okay? And then anchor your activities based on what they're interested in. And that's that whole concept of constructivism. All right? And so that's the relevant piece that comes in. All right? And the next thing is the pedagogy should occur in the context that is familiar to students and that addresses multiple ways of thinking. A lot of students who come from collectivist societies do very well in, she's just nodding and accepting everything I'm saying. Believe in what?
You know, like working in groups and co-creating knowledge. And
Absolutely.
And like building things together.
Can we work together?
Yes, I would love to.
Oh, wow. Right. Awesome. She's done it. Collectivist societies really love group work. They have to be involved in the co-creation of knowledge. They can't sit down and you tell them, okay, A, B, C. They have to investigate. They're involved in dialogue. And a lot of these are African-American societies, are Mexican-American. We are referred to as collectivist societies, all right? So one of the things we wanted to share with you, and I'm going to have Jinko share with you, is in 2015, the school district invested a lot of money and purchased multicultural resources for you because we were asking our teachers to be culturally congruent in our classrooms. But that's a lot. So what they did is invested and purchased several pieces of resources for you. And there are two kinds of resources that you received. Jinko?
Okay, so we received multicultural literature. So the stories are about groups in the United States. They have been marginalized and stereotyped and underrepresented. And the stories, those are challenging oppression and stereotypes, and also the racism and sexism. And those move us away from single story, the single perspective.
Okay.
And then we also have a global literature, the stories set outside the United States. And the other one is international stories. Those originally first published outside the United States and translated into English and republished in the United States.
All right. So I think the idea of incorporating both multicultural and global literature is crucial because we are living in a global society. Our kids need to be able to navigate in a democratic global society today. So it's no longer just how do I function in my local community, but we have to look at local, we have to look at national, and we have to look at international. So we've had one of the gentlemen who likes to really support us, is a retiree from Raytheon. And he said one of the most fascinating things about these large industries or companies is the diversity that is included in that and the nuances that come with dealing with people of diverse cultures. So our kids need to be able to do that, right?
So Dr. Bishop, she's a professor at Ohio State University. She described books as mirrors and windows and sliding doors. So the mirrors, she said that books can be mirrors. We can see ourselves, our identity and culture and our lives. And the books can be also windows. We can see others, other cultures and other histories. And the windows can be also sliding doors. We can walk through the world that has been created by book authors. So when books become mirrors, windows, and sliding doors, those are very powerful learning tools in the classroom. For example, we went to Deeds K-8 school and we shared MC books. And do you see the girl wearing hijab? Yeah, she found Arabic language in the picture books. And she was so excited about Arabic because she speaks Arabic at home. So in the classroom, she started teaching Arabic to her classmates. And then the other girl, she's from Tanzania, she found Swahili in the 2 picture books. And then she asked me if she can check it out because she wants to read the stories with family members. So I think this is a very powerful moment. So the students, they teach and learn each other using stories. So this is a mirrors and windows and sliding doors.
So I want to share something with you. When we give books and curriculum that really embraces our students, we create agency. What happened is when those 2 students saw books that are representative of who they are, they developed agency in terms of, I am valued in my curriculum. And that is powerful. When a kid feels that they are represented in their classroom, they develop what we refer to as agency. All of a sudden, I got this, I can do this. All right, so that's very powerful. The other thing I want to share with you as CSPs here and MTSS, I work closer with high school teachers, and I've had several high school teachers tell me one thing. When they began to use global and multicultural literature, there's a significant difference that happened in terms of community. When kids began to read about each other, there was almost an understanding that as much as we may look really different and sometimes pretty funky different, that we share universal joys and sadness. She told me, I have to tell you, Susan, the one thing that did for my classroom was building a sense of empathy. And I have to stress this because a lot of the issues we hear is related to bullying. Bullying that is related to difference. And some of the cases we've dealt with is little boys running around in middle school pulling the girls' hijabs, and running and finding it so amusing. The other day a teacher called me and said, one of the students did that, and the first thing the boys told the teacher, but nothing happened to her. So what that tells me is maybe they need to have a conversation for this student to understand why is it not appropriate for them to do that. So in addition to high interest and high engagement, when you are reflected in your curriculum, there's high interest and high engagement, but it also builds a sense of empathy and community. So I don't know whether any of you guys are seeing a lot of issues as far as discipline and bullying and unfairness. Anybody wants to share with us?
Oh. There you go. Go for it.
So I was just telling my table partner, on Friday I went to African American Heritage Day as one of the chaperones. And I was the only white person on the bus. And they climbed on the bus and the swear words were just flying. And a lot of disparaging racial slurs were flying. And so I stood up and said, I stopped the bus. And I said, we're not doing this. We're not doing it. And on the way down, it was okay. They stopped. On the way back, it was unbelievably bad. Like unbelievably bad. And I think the one thing that struck me the most was I was sitting up front, and I'm new to this school, so I don't know the students by name. But I'm new to the school, and I heard in the back, because I had made it very clear they would not use the N-word in the bus. And when it happened, I would go back and sit next to them. Well, they didn't want me sitting next to them because they're high school students. So they would stop using the N-word, so they started screaming in the back of the bus, melanin. And they were screaming it directly at a very light-skinned young man. I didn't know the young man, so I got up, went back into the bus, and and I said to them, I said, I am so unbelievably troubled by this because we just spent an entire day celebrating culture. And to have you disparage this young man is just unbelievable to me. And so I sat next to him and they stopped. And that was only because I was sitting there. I found out later, the second I disappeared, it started right back up again. And I have to tell you that this last weekend for me it was very bizarre, because I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to get fired for being so mean to these kids. Because I wasn't mean, but I'm also an ED teacher. And so I fully expect a modicum of appropriate behavior. And if you don't have it, I'm not going to let it slide. I found out that the chaperone on that bus for the past 3 years has not addressed it one time. And so I really, really ended up taking on an entire busload of kids. And I was the only white person on the bus. And nobody else did. It was amazing to me. And by Monday morning, the parent of that little boy had already written letters all the way up. And thank God we had addressed it. It had been dealt with, the kids had been pulled out and everything beforehand. But it was amazing to me.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing. I know this is not what I wanted to talk about, but I have to address this. We've been to a school where we were dealing with a very controversial topic, but I'm going to be honest with you. I had a principal and I had teachers tell me, you know what? I don't feel equipped to address some of these terms. Am I right? Because what's going to happen? You'll end up being the controversy, won't you? All right? And because of that, I actually have a PD in March, is how to unpack controversial books and topics. This is my recommendation, is I always use books and stories. Books and stories provide safe spaces to begin to unpack pivotal social issues. That's always been my recommendation to teachers. Don't stand there and talk about it. Use a book. When you have began and developed that conversation using the space provided by a book, then we can move on to others. We were called into a school to deal with that word. And my teachers and principals said, I am not going there. I don't have the tools, and I don't want to be the controversy. But what has happened with all my high school teachers who come to our PDs, we've equipped them with ways to use books. And I don't use one book. I am not a believer of one book. If you're going to use a book, you're going to use multiple ones, because books are apolitical. They're political. What I do is we use paired texts. You are presenting an entire holistic story, multiple perspectives. We all are in the world and live in the world differently. My experiences and your experiences are different. My perspective, because my lens is different from yours, is different. So that's the safest way. And now we have a school, the counselor is using our books to deal with issues. So he's using books. Books are safe. And they're on the curriculum map, and they're governing board approved. How about that? And Junko has done a phenomenal job where she has paired every books for you for every single social issue you might want to unpack, because we've gotten so many of those. And so we have lists, especially as CSPs or MTSS people, and I'm going to be working with Julie later on, is I want to say I'm dealing with this going on right now. That particular word seems to be very common. In first grade, I almost collapsed when they called me to deal with first graders. They're like, what? They can't even say ABCD. But that word is just flying out of their mouths. So I had to stop. So books, perfect. And the teacher said, I'm not going there, man. Yes?
So I've heard wonderful things about your multicultural permit. I've never been able to go to a PD. But do you have text? I know you have, I believe, in text sets. So do you have lists of text sets that address certain issues?
Yes.
How do we get access to those?
We will leave you our contact information and get in touch. But we actually, do we have the text sets online? On What Works. Have you been to TUSD's website? Is it TUSD.org? Michael? What Works? Is it on the TUSD? Yes. Okay. So .org, and then you go What Works, and then you go to Multicultural Curriculum. We've put all our resources there. We were requested to do that. Texas, if you want to deal bullying, if you want to deal with kids of poverty and how to address that, we've put all those text sets there. Okay? And you guys have these books in your library. Every school received these books. So when we display books here, which you're going to be working with real shortly, they're in your schools. And we've been to almost every school, and you have them. All right? All right. So when you look at the curriculum maps, you guys are very aware of this. So when we began reconstructing the curriculum, TUSD's curriculum, to make sure that it's culturally congruent, we began by looking at what are the essential questions. We made sure that they were global in scale, because when I first looked at one, there was an essential question that said, everybody aspires to be American. I was like, whoo, excuse me. It's awesome to be American, but let's look at it from a global perspective. So if you look at the essential questions, the enduring understandings, they are very broad in perspective. And then we've also included particular books that help you address your units. Because if you guys know that our curriculum map is anchored in 4 standards, anchor standards, which is identity, diversity, justice, and action. Action and social justice from the Southern Poverty Law Center. So we have also identified those resources that you need to be able to address the themes in your curriculum maps per quarter. Okay? Any questions before we get you guys moving and working? I'm always a high energy person, I'm sorry. And I had lunch, which is rare. Okay, so here we go. The other thing we want to introduce to you guys, and this really stemmed from some work we were doing at Atterback, but I said if I have time, I really want to share this. When we came on board, one of the things that really struck me was we always referred to our students as either green, yellow, black, or orange. Okay? When we talk about kids and we talk about ourselves, we are a multiplicity of identities. They intersect to form who we are. I was at a school doing an ongoing PD, and a teacher came to me and shared with me and said, I have difficulty connecting with my black students. And actually, I was very impressed that he said that to me, because he felt confident enough to say that to me, and he wanted to rectify that. So the first thing I asked him is, you do realize that that child is a lot more than just being black. There are multiple, he has multiple identities. And when we recognize that about our students, it gives us multiple ways to engage and connect with our students. So they're doing this awesome project at Atterback, which just blows my mind, where they've had to select one of the most challenging students, and they've had to do an intersectionality lens on them. Is find out what else about that kid. So this teacher told me, he emailed me and said, I found out that kid is an expert on Minecraft. If you see that kid and that teacher over lunch, and they could not stand each other, but that kid comes in, so he has found a connection to that student. And so I just want to broaden the conversation about who our kids are. They are a lot more than black, green, yellow, orange, and purple with polka dots. Okay? So I want to share something with you, because socioeconomic status is something that truly impacts our kids. And I want to share a short video that was done by Kimberly Cranshaw that looks at our students as an intersectional identity. All right?
Intersectionality. Have you heard this word before? Even if you have, you might not know what it means. Let's take a look at it. The first part's easy enough. Intersection. A place where things come together. Intersectionality refers to the reality that we all have multiple identities that intersect to make us who we are. It also gives us a way to talk about oppressions and privileges that overlap and reinforce each other. This term dates back to the 1980s and legal scholar Kimberly Crenshaw. She noticed that we didn't have an effective way to talk about how the experiences of black women are different from the experiences of black men and of white women. How? Black women endure both gender discrimination and racial discrimination. Over the last 30 years, scholars, educators, and activists have expanded the use of the word intersectionality to talk about identities beyond race and gender. Let's look at a few examples. Jerry has a disability, and his family lives below the poverty line. He is the oldest of 10, which requires him to do a lot of caregiving and sometimes keeps him out of school. No one in the school counseling office has talked to Jerry or his parents about his plans for after graduation. He has applied for several jobs, but never gets called back. Fatima is Muslim and recently came to the United States from Somalia. She finds that many people at her school make assumptions about her values and abilities before they speak to her. Many of her classmates think she shouldn't be at their school at all. Greta comes from an affluent family. Both her parents and grandparents went to college, and her father owns a successful business. She doesn't think about her identity very often, but she does think of herself as someone who will go to college and get a good job once she graduates. Think about Greta's situation as opposed to Fatima's or Jerry's. Fatima and Jerry are members of marginalized groups. They don't get to choose whether or not to think about their identities. Greta, on the other hand, can ignore intersectionality if she wants to. Life isn't the same for everyone, even for people who share identity characteristics. By adopting an intersectional lens, we have a better opportunity to understand why and to change the institutions that help and harm us based on who we are. Want to learn more? Read our story, Teaching at the Intersections, in the summer 2016 issue of Teaching Tolerance magazine.
Somebody want to share, reflect a little bit on what you've just seen? It's nothing new, but it just constantly reminds us that our kids and who we, just like we are, so many things intersect to form who we are. And it's being able to recognize that and tap into all those things that make us who we are. Anybody wants to share anything that crossed your mind as you were watching that? Did you guys have lunch? Were you given time? Were you given time to have lunch? Oh shoot, she's back. All right, so we've drafted what an intersectionality lens looks like. So one of the things is all these things really impact our life experiences. All right, so beginning with race, ethnicity, religion, language, heritage, immigration status, which is a big thing today. I've heard from teachers, a lot of their students are really struggling. Family status, income, socioeconomic status. I have a beautiful story out of Tucson High, but again, it's really acknowledging that all these things impact our students. And if you could address, connect, or form a bridge to either one of these, I think our ability to make those relationships, because as a teacher, I have to be honest with you, when I went into teaching, because I left corporate America and then I went into teaching, I thought, I wanted my summer off. Woo! Before the first semester was done, I was quitting. But because I did not go with the idea of making relationships with my students, then one of my mentors called me aside. She told me, guess what, Susan? I know you think you can change the world, but I want to tell you one thing. I want you to spend the first 2 weeks of your semester building relationships, and the curriculum will follow. And sure enough, I had a student tell me, you know, before I built the relationships, I'm not interested in what you have to tell me. I was like, oh. I had not been trained as a teacher. I got my certification later on, and a student turns around. Because I went in with the idea that I have it all. Let me tell you, sit down and listen. They told me, sit down and you listen. Okay? And so when I built the relationships, I realized the curriculum was so much easier. That didn't mean that all the kids were doing their work, but they were not interrupting me. That was good enough for me, you know? So they'd sit in the corner, they wouldn't necessarily do the work, but they did not take over my class. And so those who wanted to learn were able to learn. When I built those relationships, they would come sit at a corner. When it was over, they would leave. Oh, I loved them for that, because the previous semester, oh my word. But anyway, so let's move on. What we want you guys to do is, we always feel it's important for you to be able to really engage in the texts. Because as CSPs and the MTSS coordinators and the magnet coordinators, you don't necessarily use these books. But I want you to be aware of them, because we have seen that our books and our literature is being used for intervention. Kids are being called in to deal with issues. Like I talked to you guys, use books as safe spaces to deal with some of the social issues that you're dealing with in your schools. Okay? The racial issues that are going on. Use a book. Okay? So I want you guys to take a few minutes to just engage with the text on your desks. But we do have an assignment for you. So high school, you want to make sure you are seated at a high school table. And so let's see. High school is right here. High school is right here. And high school is right there. On your tables, you have an engagement. That's what we refer to as an activity you need to respond to. So I'm going to quickly run through high school. We want you to browse the books on your table. So just quickly look at them. And do you notice we've put you picture books? In high school, we never offered you picture books before. But we are realizing teachers want picture books. And I've put you some picture books that have no narrative. The kids create the narrative. Okay? So we want you to browse those books, and then we want you to select one that you want to continue to work with. All right? So at your table, you have the assignment. Am I right, Junko? Okay. So in the high school, you're going to look through your book. You're going to look at the cover. You're going to look at the blurb, table of contents, and review. So if you decide to take a chapter book, we don't expect you to read it in 10 minutes. So we've asked you to look at the cover, get a sense of what the story is, who the characters are, because it's actually very easy to do that. And then I want you, using the Post-it notepads, I want you to identify key issues the characters are facing. We want you to write down the issues on a Post-it and place it on the book cover. Think about potential causes, actions the characters take to solve the issues that they're facing. All right? And then we're going to have you guys share at your tables. Middle school. In pairs, read a book. So these are engagements we've had teachers use in their classrooms, and they say the students love it. It's very different from the regular, okay, now read the chapter, summarize the chapter, who are the characters, okay, what are the 6 elements of literature? You can do all that, but using a very novel concept to do that. All right? I want you to have a silent conversation by talking on paper. So 2 of you are going to read one book, so it has to be a picture book. Then you're going to have a silent conversation on paper. All right? So this is what I read. What did you think? I think the kid is weird. So that's what we're looking for on a piece of paper. So 2 people are going to share a piece of paper and pencil and talk about a book by writing back and forth to each other. And this is called written conversations. The last one is the graffiti board. I love this for young kids because you don't necessarily have to write, you can sketch. And I use this with my high schoolers. They love it. One high schooler asked me, you mean I can draw during an ELA class? I said, oh yeah. Okay, it's bringing that novelty, something unique and something that really addresses their different learning styles. So for the elementary, we want you guys to, each of you will get a Post-it. Do they have the big Post-it? It's on their table. And then while or after reading, sketch your thoughts. Don't tell me what the book is telling me, I already know. What are your thoughts about what you're reading? And again, that's raising that DOK. It's called the reader response. Okay, you know we're used to telling the students summarize what you've just read? That's DOK 1. I want your reaction to the character, to the plot, right? What are some connections you can make? Remember, kids learn by making connections. And so that's why we always start with the anticipatory set, is in what do they already know? And then how can I connect the new information to the old information? If we know anything about brain science and learning, kids have to make connections for it to stick, okay? Are we good? We got 9 minutes. Let's go. So we're about to leave. It's almost coming to an end, but Thank you for doing this. I was just looking at the issues she's identified using a book. She's got discrimination, she's got poverty. But what I was thinking about, can you imagine when students work together as a team and you have a purpose for doing that activity, is now you can begin to define what is discrimination. Maybe preschool up to second grade don't know what that means, but there's the idea of fairness. We did a big project at Howell and Blendman 2 years ago where there was just rampant bullying. And this started from a book that were trying to solve the issue of bullying in their school. And we started talking to students, okay, discrimination, we don't know what that is, but let's bring it down to their kiddie language. They talked about unfairness. So we asked them to define. So we started webbing. So we got an issue that was presented in the book, and then we started webbing. What does that look like? Then we asked them, where do you experience unfairness? In the playground. It became such a big thing. They did an assembly about it, and they developed norms from the school. That was created because of the real issues of bullying, because parents had come in to start complaining. It had become an issue that the school had no choice but to address. But it began those critical conversations that if you didn't have a book, it might have been difficult to do that. So I love the ideas you've identified. That opens up to a lot of webbing and being able to have student voice, because they have to change the culture. And if they don't understand it, they don't have agency to change the culture. So they get the vocabulary they need to be able to have those conversations. Yes?
For middle school, one book one of our ELA teachers loves to use is called Forged by Fire.
Yes.
It addresses a lot of issues, and then she starts a lot of conversations from that, and the kids can't put it down.
Yes.
They are so engaged in that book.
Wonderful, thank you. So the other day I had a teacher call me and say, Susan, I have a kid who can't put a book down. Then I said, so what do you want me to do? I thought that's a good thing. Because previously to that, she told me that kid cannot read. So she called me, I cannot get this kid to put down the book. I told her, make up your mind. What do you want? Okay, but we've had stories. Junko came from a school the other day, exceptional ed. This is a 6th grader. The teacher told her this is the first time this kid has finished a book. First time ever. To me, that's phenomenal. Because we keep hearing these kids are not reading. And when we talk about mirrors, it's a book that does not necessarily mean it is just my ethnicity that I'm looking at. So I'm picking a book that has Mexican American characters or black characters. We're looking at a book that reflects some of my life experiences. So it's not always just color. Okay, so let's remember that. All right, thank you so much. Any questions? Right. You're welcome.